What if everything you thought you knew about Archie Harrison's birth was a carefully constructed illusion? Imagine for a moment that the story the world was told, the carefully polished photos, the rigidly scripted appearances, were not the whole truth. Imagine that behind the gilded walls of palaces and mansions, there was another version of events, one too explosive to admit, too damaging to reveal, and too dangerous to let slip. Tonight, we dive headfirst into that chilling possibility. Because when Meghan Markle insisted on shielding Archie from the public eye, was she protecting him from media harassment or hiding him from the truth? From the very beginning, Meghan presented herself as the fiercely protective mother, determined to shield her child from the cruel tabloid glare. It sounded noble, even heroic. But was it genuine motherly instinct? Or was there something else at play? Why was Archie the first royal baby in modern history to be hidden away so obsessively? Why were traditions broken, protocols ignored, and public expectations crushed? And why did even palace staff whisper that something about Meghan's pregnancy didn't add up? These questions lingered in the background for years, dismissed by some as gossip, brushed off by others as cruel speculation. But when the woman who once looked after Archie, his nanny, finally broke her silence at age 48, the world was confronted with a story darker than anyone imagined. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about it. Royal babies have always been unveiled like treasures. Prince William was shown to the cameras outside St. Mary's Hospital. Kate Middleton, despite her struggles, stood smiling with George, Charlotte, and Louis in her arms for the world to see. Diana did the same with William and Harry. That's the tradition: transparency, joy, continuity. And yet Meghan and Harry did the opposite. No hospital steps, no photographers, no baby on day one. Just a series of tightly controlled, distant, and staged images. Why? Was Meghan really so terrified of the press? Or was she terrified of being exposed? That is the question we must explore. As the world speculated, Meghan's behavior only deepened the mystery. One day, her pregnancy bump seemed to balloon. The next, it shrank. Some swore the bump even folded when she sat down, like fabric collapsing in on itself. Was this the natural movement of pregnancy, or the mechanics of something else? A prosthetic, perhaps? A Hollywood-style prop? These images, analyzed by countless watchers online, fueled one of the most controversial debates in royal history. Was Meghan Markle truly pregnant with Archie Harrison? Now let's step into the palace corridors during those tense months. Staff members were instructed to keep their distance. Conversations about Meghan's condition were abruptly shut down. Anyone who asked too many questions was met with icy stares. But in this silence, suspicion only grew. And then, into this web of secrecy, came a woman named Lhorren Khumalo, an experienced nanny, a professional who had cared for children across cultures, trained in proper etiquette, trusted by families of means. When she arrived to care for Archie, she noticed things. Small things at first. The way Meghan reacted when anyone touched the baby. The peculiar instructions about schedules. The odd insistence that photos remained strictly private. Were these simply the quirks of an anxious new mother? Or were they signs of a deeper secret? This is where the story becomes less about paparazzi harassment and more about the raw fear of discovery. Meghan often claimed that privacy was about protection. But whose protection? Archie's, or her own? If Meghan wasn't Archie's biological mother, then every photo risked exposing the truth. Every public appearance was a potential catastrophe. Is that why she clung so desperately to control? Is that why she denied the press what they had always been given? An open, human glimpse of royal family life. Let's not forget the timing. The Sussexes were at war with the press. Every headline was a battlefield. Yet rather than fighting only over their reputations, they were waging a parallel battle over Archie's existence itself. Think back to the confusion on the day of his birth. The palace issued statements, then retracted them. Reporters were told one thing, then corrected hours later. Details didn't line up. The birth announcement felt staged, delayed, off. And within hours, conspiracy theories began to spread like wildfire. Could all of this chaos be explained by a simple truth Meghan dared not admit? That she hadn't given birth at all? Now, consider Lhorren Khumalo once more. For years, she stayed silent. Bound by agreements, by fear, by loyalty, perhaps even by intimidation. But silence is heavy. It eats at you. It gnaws at your conscience. And as she reached 48, something shifted. She decided the world deserved to know what she had witnessed. The truth about Archie's beginnings, the truth about Meghan's secrecy, the truth about why this baby was treated so differently from every other royal child. And once she spoke, the narrative began to crumble. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, if Meghan had nothing to hide, why break every tradition? Why risk fueling speculation with secrecy? Why did the palace scramble to cover up inconsistencies? Why did her nanny, of all people, feel compelled to speak decades later? These aren't the actions of a woman simply worried about tabloids. These are the actions of someone guarding something monumental. Picture this: a nanny, standing in the nursery, holding the baby she was tasked to protect. A baby she loved, but a situation she could not fully understand. She noticed things she tucked away in her memory. She heard whispers. She asked questions. And when the answers never came, she began to form her own. Years later, those memories are no longer whispers. They are revelations. And they force us to confront a question many have dared to ask, but few have dared to answer. Who is Archie Harrison's real mother? Because if Meghan Markle is not, then everything changes. It reframes her battles with the press. It reframes her war with the royals. It reframes her very identity as a mother. And it explains why she would fight so viciously, so obsessively, to keep Archie hidden from the world's gaze. Not out of love, not out of protection, but out of fear. Fear that the truth would slip through the cracks. Fear that the cameras, with their unrelenting lenses, would capture something she could not control. Fear that the world would discover the biggest royal secret of all. And so we arrive at the edge of the story. Meghan's obsession with privacy wasn't just about the press. It wasn't just about protecting her child. It was about hiding the truth. A truth that Nanny Lhorren Khumalo, after years of silence, finally dared to reveal. But what exactly did she see? What exactly did she hear? And what was so shocking that she carried it like a burden for decades before finally letting the world in? The answers lie ahead. But be warned. Once you hear them, you'll never look at Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, or Archie Harrison the same way again. Because what comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why would Meghan Markle ban even trusted aides, even those closest to her, from getting too close to Archie Harrison? That's the question that ignites the first chapter of this story, and it's one that cuts deeper than the narrative of a mother protecting her child. Because when you strip away the glamour, the Hollywood polish, and the palace spin, what you're left with are moments of raw, unsettling secrecy that didn't just puzzle staff, they unsettled them. Imagine the scene inside the palace during Archie's earliest months. Staff members, professionals who had served generations of royals, were given odd instructions. Don't linger. Don't take photos. Don't ask questions. Don't even try to bond too closely. Think about that. Nannies, aides, housekeepers, cooks, all of them were suddenly under a new regime of silence and distance. And not just because Meghan wanted privacy. This wasn't the kind of privacy that protects. It was the kind that isolates, that draws boundaries so sharp you can't help but notice the red flags. What mother, especially a new mother, doesn't want her baby celebrated, adored, embraced? Why did Meghan treat Archie like a secret to be contained instead of a child to be cherished in the open? From the outside, it looked strange. From the inside, it was alarming. Staff whispered to one another in hushed tones, afraid of being overheard. Some compared Meghan's parenting style to an actress rehearsing a role rather than a mother living a reality. Was this maternal instinct or stage management? Were her actions rooted in fear of paparazzi or fear of discovery? And what exactly did she not want discovered? Consider this. For decades, royal nannies and aides have played integral roles in the upbringing of children. William and Harry adored their nannies. Kate Middleton has relied on Maria Barallo, who appears openly with the Cambridge children. These women become beloved, almost second mothers. Their roles are celebrated. Their closeness is natural. Yet Meghan broke this tradition. She kept Archie at arm's length, not from herself, but from others. No photographs, no casual cuddles, no behind-the-scenes moments. Only carefully curated appearances, staged when she deemed it safe. Doesn't that sound less like a mother's instinct and more like the guarding of a secret? Even royal photographers noticed. Instead of joyfully presenting Archie to the world, Meghan and Harry staged awkward, brief appearances. Remember that moment at Windsor Castle? Harry beaming, Meghan smiling tightly, holding Archie in a way that seemed almost calculated. No spontaneity, no warmth, just choreography. Compare that to Kate's glowing, disheveled hospital step photos. Or Diana, radiant as she carried William and Harry out of the Lindo wing. Meghan rejected that openness and replaced it with control. Why? Was it really the press she feared? Or was it something closer to home, something that couldn't withstand the scrutiny of an unfiltered lens? Inside the palace, aides noticed patterns. Meghan would react sharply if someone leaned too close. She would stiffen if questions about Archie's feeding or sleeping schedules were raised. Unlike most mothers, who gratefully accept advice, she bristled. Why? Because those questions risked exposure. Because every detail mattered if you were holding on to a lie. Think about it. If you are hiding something monumental, the smallest slip can unravel it all. Was Meghan afraid of those slips? And here's where it gets chilling. Some aides described the atmosphere around Archie as like handling a state secret. He wasn't just a baby. He was treated like evidence. Evidence that couldn't be mishandled, touched, or examined too closely. A baby whose very existence was wrapped in restrictions. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Doesn't that scream that something about his origins wasn't as natural as the world was led to believe? Direct question to you, the viewer. If you were a parent, would you forbid even your closest aides from bonding with your child? Would you limit photographs so obsessively? Would you shun traditions so harshly, knowing full well that breaking those traditions would spark speculation? Or would you only do these things if you had something you couldn't afford the world to see? Now, let's widen the lens. Meghan and Harry often blamed the press, claiming they wanted a normal life for Archie. But what is normal about total isolation? What is normal about rejecting generations of royal tradition? What is normal about controlling every image, every statement, every detail? The truth is, their obsession with secrecy only fueled more questions. And those questions weren't coming just from the tabloids. They were coming from the palace staff themselves. People who had seen royal children raised before. People who knew what normal looked like. People who whispered that Meghan's behavior wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. And then came the night that everything crystallized. The night Meghan's obsession with secrecy revealed itself, most starkly. A night when even Lhorren Khumalo, the nanny herself, began to wonder what exactly she was protecting and who she was really serving. Because as Meghan shielded Archie from the world, she wasn't just building walls against the press. She was building walls inside the palace itself. Walls meant to keep even the most trusted people at a distance. Walls that whispered of a truth too dangerous to let slip. But here's the question that takes us to the next stage. If Meghan's obsession didn't start with the press, where did it start? What was she really trying to hide? The answer, as we peel back the layers, takes us not to the castle gates, but to the delivery room. Because that's where the story of Archie Harrison truly begins. And that's where the contradictions start to pile up. Because when Meghan Markle stepped into that delivery room, the world was told one story. But those who were there, those who saw, those who heard, know another. And that's where the truth begins to break free. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Was there ever a real pregnancy? That's the question that has haunted this story from the very beginning. When Meghan Markle first stepped out in front of cameras with a blossoming bump, the world was meant to celebrate. A royal baby on the way, history in the making. But from day one, sharp-eyed observers noticed something strange. One day, Meghan's belly appeared much larger than expected for her stage. Another day, it looked smaller, higher, or oddly shaped. Some swore it even folded when she bent down, like fabric collapsing. Was this the natural fluidity of pregnancy? Or was it something else entirely? A carefully crafted illusion? Let's put this into perspective. Pregnancies are unpredictable, yes. Every woman carries differently, yes. But the number of inconsistencies in Meghan's bump was staggering. Thousands of fans and critics alike began comparing photos, side by side, from public appearances. 1 week in January, her bump appeared neat and compact beneath a cream-colored dress. A few days later, in a different outfit, it looked significantly larger, protruding in a way that seemed weeks ahead. Photographs from February showed the bump almost slipping as Meghan crouched down. And in March, with only weeks to go, it seemed smaller again. The human body doesn't fluctuate that dramatically overnight. But props? Costumes? Those can. Now ask yourself, if you saw someone's stomach fold when they sat, would you believe it was a real pregnancy? Would you believe a real baby bump could shift like a cushion sliding under clothing? The internet was merciless. Clips of Meghan bending down at public engagements circulated, slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed. Was it proof of a moon bump? Or just unlucky camera angles? The debate raged online, dismissed by mainstream outlets as conspiracy, but dissected by thousands who refused to ignore what their eyes were telling them. And this is where things get even more interesting. Meghan is an actress. She knows staging. She knows costumes. She knows how to create an illusion. Is it really so far-fetched to imagine she might have used her Hollywood experience to engineer a storyline? Think about it. She had entered the royal family with massive scrutiny, criticized at every turn. A baby offered her redemption. A baby offered her power. A baby tied her to the monarchy forever. But what if she couldn't, or wouldn't, carry one? What then? The answer: you create the appearance of pregnancy. You are the bump. You control the narrative. You sell the story. Meanwhile, palace insiders noticed the secrecy tightening around Meghan's pregnancy. Doctors weren't named. Hospital plans were murky. Unlike Kate, who openly posed outside the Lindo wing, Meghan's delivery location was hidden, shuffled, changed. Even staff who normally prepared for such events were left in the dark. And when Archie's birth was finally announced, it came with a storm of confusion. Was he born at home? Was he born at Portland Hospital? Why were reporters misled? Why did official announcements change within hours? If this was a straightforward pregnancy and birth, why the chaos? Direct question to you, the audience. If everything was above board, why hide so much? Why change details? Why risk fueling speculation? Unless, of course, the speculation itself was dangerously close to the truth. This brings us to the heart of the matter. If Meghan wasn't truly pregnant, then who was? Was surrogacy involved? And if so, why not admit it? Royals may bend tradition, but surrogacy isn't scandalous in itself. Many families choose it. The scandal comes when deception is involved, when the world is told one thing, while another reality plays out in the shadows. And deception, in the royal family, is toxic. It destroys trust, it dismantles image, it destabilizes the very foundation of monarchy itself. Now, let's return to the night of Archie's supposed birth. Official reports first suggested Meghan was in labor. Hours later, the palace announced she had already given birth. Confused? You weren't alone. Reporters scrambled. Broadcasters stumbled over changing lines. The story didn't flow. It felt staged, like a performance being rewritten on the fly. Was this just poor communication, or a cover-up? If Meghan wasn't actually delivering a baby that night, then the palace was tasked with pretending she had. That would explain the missteps, the contradictions, the frantic corrections. And here's where the nanny, Lhorren Khumalo, becomes critical. She arrived after the so-called birth, tasked with caring for Archie. But even she noticed things. The baby's appearance didn't match the timeline. His size raised questions. His early care routines didn't line up with what she had been told. And Meghan's behavior toward the child, overprotective, restrictive, controlling, didn't feel like that of a mother who had just endured pregnancy and birth. It felt like someone guarding a fragile secret. Was Meghan protecting herself more than she was protecting Archie? Let's add another layer of tension. Meghan's public interviews about her pregnancy often sounded rehearsed, scripted, inconsistent. In one moment, she described the experience glowingly. In another, she brushed off details entirely, deflecting questions with vague smiles. Contrast that with Kate Middleton, who spoke candidly about morning sickness, about struggles, about hospital visits. Meghan, the actress, never slipped. She never opened up in a way that felt raw or real. Was that discipline? Or was it fear of revealing too much? Ask yourself, if Meghan's pregnancy was real, why didn't she share in the way most women do? Moments of vulnerability, honesty, even humor? Why did she cling so tightly to control, rejecting every tradition, silencing every curiosity, closing every door? Could it be because she knew that even the smallest mistake might pull the mask away? And this takes us to the deeper, darker theory. Meghan wasn't just playing a protective mother. She was playing a role. The bump was a costume. The story was a script. And the world was her audience. The problem with scripts, though, is that real life has a way of breaking in. A camera catches an odd angle. A reporter notices a discrepancy. A nanny sees something that doesn't add up. And once those cracks form, it's only a matter of time before the truth seeps through. So here's the haunting question. If Meghan never carried Archie, then why create the illusion? Was it vanity? Was it control? Was it an attempt to cement her position in the royal family? Or was it desperation? The act of a woman who feared the world would judge her unworthy if she admitted the truth? Perhaps it was all of these at once. But the result was the same. A story built on secrecy, enforced by silence, held together by fear. And that's why Meghan's obsession with keeping Archie hidden from the world makes sense in hindsight. Every photo risked exposure. Every appearance risked contradiction. Every uncontrolled moment risked undoing the illusion. So she fought. She silenced. She shielded. She built walls around her son, not because of paparazzi, but because of truth. A truth too explosive to face. But remember, the world was only seeing the surface. Behind those walls, inside the palace, lived the people who witnessed the cracks firsthand. People like Lhorren Khumalo. People who held Archie, who saw the inconsistencies, who asked questions that never received answers. People who carried secrets in silence, until one day the burden became too heavy. And that silence finally shattered when the nanny spoke. Because once Lhorren entered the story, the narrative could no longer be controlled. She saw things no one else was supposed to see. She heard whispers no one else was supposed to hear. And when she finally chose to speak out, she didn't just challenge Meghan's version of events, she dismantled it. But what exactly did this nanny witness? What exactly did she hear? And why did she stay silent for so many years, only to reveal the truth now, at 48? The answer to that question will take us directly into her life, her background, her conscience, and it will shake the foundation of Meghan's carefully constructed world. And when you learn who Lhorren Khumalo really is, you'll understand why her silence mattered, and why her voice now changes everything. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Who is Lhorren Khumalo, really? Why does her voice matter so much in this story that has already gripped the world with speculation, secrecy, and suspicion? It's easy to look at her simply as a nanny, a caretaker in the background of royal life, someone paid to change diapers, soothe a crying baby, and keep the household running smoothly. But to reduce her role to that would be a mistake. Because Lhorren was more than just a nanny. She was a witness. And in the world of tightly guarded royal secrets, sometimes a witness is the most dangerous person of all. Let's begin at the start. Lhorren Khumalo isn't a household name like Meghan Markle or Prince Harry. She wasn't someone who sought fame, tabloids, or headlines. She came from a background of professionalism, trained and experienced in childcare. A woman who knew her craft, respected the rules of discretion, and carried herself with dignity. At just over 40 when she began working with Archie, she already had years of expertise under her belt. She wasn't some starstruck newcomer dazzled by royal titles. She was steady, grounded, and deeply committed to her work. And it was precisely this combination, her professionalism, her silence, her integrity, that made her the perfect choice for the Sussex household. Or so they thought. When Meghan and Harry welcomed Archie, they wanted control. Every move was staged, every appearance scripted, every word calculated. To maintain this, they needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Someone reliable, discreet, loyal. That person was Lhorren. But here's the twist. The very qualities that made her so trusted would later make her testimony so powerful. Because when she finally broke her silence, the world listened. And it wasn't the voice of a tabloid journalist, a critic, or a royal biographer. It was the voice of a woman who had been inside. A woman who had seen what others weren't allowed to see. A woman whose conscience refused to stay buried forever. But let's dig deeper. Who was she before the palace? Lhorren Khumalo was a career nanny, part of a profession often underestimated but critically important in high-profile families. Nannies see everything. They're in the room during the quiet hours. They're present when the cameras are off. They notice the rhythms of family life, the tensions, the secrets, the contradictions. And unlike friends or advisors, they aren't supposed to speak. They're supposed to fade into the background. But what happens when fading into the background means carrying the weight of a secret that could shake the monarchy? That's the dilemma Lhorren faced. From the start, she noticed Meghan's intensity. Every mother has quirks, yes. But Meghan's were different. Instructions were strict, sometimes contradictory. Privacy rules were suffocating. Simple requests, like holding Archie a certain way or avoiding eye contact during vulnerable moments, felt less like maternal protectiveness and more like paranoia. And in those moments, Lhorren's role shifted. She wasn't just a caretaker. She became a silent observer in a theater where the script was carefully written, and any unscripted moment risked chaos. Consider how Meghan treated the press about Archie. The world was told she wanted privacy. That sounded noble. But inside the household, it was more than noble, it was absolute. Even Lhorren, the nanny, was instructed on what not to say, what not to do, how not to behave. It was as if Archie's life was being guarded like a state secret. And here's the chilling irony. Nannies, by profession, are supposed to build bonds with the children they care for. They sing to them, comfort them, rock them to sleep. But Lhorren sometimes felt as though she was caring for Archie through a wall. The rules, the restrictions, the distance, all of it created an unnatural environment. And the question she quietly asked herself was this: why? This question lingered in her mind for years. Yet she said nothing. She was bound by contracts, by NDAs, by the unspoken rules of royal employment. Silence was expected. Silence was survival. And for a long time, she obeyed. But here's what people forget. Silence doesn't erase memory. Every moment, every contradiction, every strange instruction, Lhorren carried them with her. And as the years passed, that burden grew heavier. Because silence protects in the short term, but it gnaws at the soul in the long term. And when she reached 48, something inside her changed. Maybe it was age, maybe it was conscience, maybe it was the belief that Archie himself deserved the truth. But whatever the reason, she could no longer carry the burden alone. Now think about this from another angle. Why does her testimony matter so much? Because unlike journalists, unlike commentators, unlike critics, Lhorren was inside. She was the one rocking Archie to sleep, the one present when Meghan wasn't on camera, the one who saw the cracks up close. Her words aren't theories. They aren't gossip. They are observations. And that makes them far more dangerous to Meghan's carefully controlled image. Let me ask you this. If you were in her position, would you have stayed silent? Would you have obeyed the rules, buried the memories, and let history write a false story? Or would you have chosen, eventually, to speak? Because that's what Lhorren did. She chose to open her mouth after decades of silence, knowing full well that doing so would place her at the center of a storm. And yet, she did it anyway. Why? Because sometimes the truth refuses to stay hidden. This is the moment where the story transforms. Up until now, Meghan's secrecy could be dismissed as paranoia. Her bump inconsistencies could be explained away as fashion. The palace's missteps could be chalked up to poor communication. But when the nanny speaks, when the witness finally testifies, all of that collapses. The excuses fall apart. The narrative shatters. Because once you bring the testimony of someone who was inside, who saw with her own eyes, the world has no choice but to reconsider everything. And yet, Lhorren's silence for so long raises its own question. Why didn't she speak earlier? Why wait until 48? Why carry the weight for decades? Was it fear of the Sussex machine? Was it loyalty to Archie? Or was it self-preservation, waiting until she was far enough removed from royal employment to finally tell the truth without fear of reprisal? Each possibility is compelling. Each adds another layer of drama to this story. And each reminds us of the immense pressure those who work inside royal households endure. Loyalty is demanded, but conscience is harder to silence. So now we face the turning point. We've asked who Meghan is. We've asked if she was truly pregnant. And now, we've asked who Lhorren Khumalo really is. The answer is simple yet powerful. She is the woman who saw. She is the woman who remembered. She is the woman who finally spoke. And her decision to speak out has forced the world to reopen a case it thought was closed. Was Meghan Markle truly Archie's mother? Or was the world deceived from the start? As we move forward, her role will only grow. Because the next part of this story isn't just about what Meghan did. It's about what Lhorren saw. And the first moment that shattered her silence happened not in the glare of the cameras, but in the quiet of the nursery, the night Archie came home. And what she noticed that night was enough to raise questions so profound that she could never unsee them. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The night Archie came home, why nothing felt normal. Imagine the weight of that moment. For any family, The first night home with a newborn is supposed to be filled with joy, nervous excitement, and the tender chaos of new life. It's the night parents nervously double-check bottles, bassinets, blankets. The air is heavy with love, exhaustion, and wonder. But in the Sussex household, when Archie Harrison was brought home, the atmosphere was entirely different. And Lhorren Khumalo, the nanny, felt it the moment she stepped into the room. It wasn't joy that filled the air. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't the warmth of a family adjusting to life with a baby. No, what filled that night was tension, anxiety, control. Something felt off, and it was impossible to ignore. Let's picture it. Meghan and Harry arrive home with Archie. Staff are ready, arrangements made. Everyone expects the familiar flurry, a proud mother, a glowing father, doting aides cooing over the baby. Instead, silence. Orders are sharp. Instructions are unusual. Meghan clutches Archie with a grip so tight, it's almost theatrical. No one is to touch him without explicit permission. No photos, no casual glances, no chatter. Archie is not a baby to be celebrated. He is a secret to be guarded. Why? Why such intensity on the very first night? Could it really be explained by privacy? Or was Meghan already terrified that if anyone got too close, they might notice something? Something that contradicted the story she was desperate to tell the world? Lhorren watched closely. That's what nannies do. They read the rhythms of a household. They sensed the energy of a room. And what she sensed that night was unease. Archie himself seemed well enough, tiny, innocent, fragile. But Meghan's behavior was unusual. Instead of the relaxed vulnerability of a new mother, she projected rigid control. Every move was micromanaged. Every hand gesture seemed rehearsed. Even Harry appeared caught between pride and nervousness, glancing toward Meghan as if seeking approval before saying or doing anything. It wasn't the relaxed chaos of new parenthood. It was choreography. Ask yourself, what mother, exhausted from labor, still manages to dictate every movement, every rule, with such sharp precision? Wouldn't exhaustion soften her? Wouldn't the bond of motherhood make her more open, more natural, more tender in front of those entrusted to help? Instead, Meghan radiated something closer to paranoia. Then came the routines. Most new parents stumble, unsure how to swaddle, how to feed, how to soothe. But Meghan's instructions to Lhorren were oddly impersonal, as if she were reciting from a manual rather than speaking from experience. Feed this way. Hold him that way. Keep the schedule strict. No variation. No improvisation. And above all, no questions. If Lhorren noticed something unusual, she was not to ask. If she felt something odd, she was not to comment. Think about that. A nanny's expertise is invaluable. They're there to support, to guide, to reassure. For Meghan to cut that off so aggressively wasn't just unusual, it was unnatural. Was it because she didn't want scrutiny? Because the more questions asked, the greater the risk of truth slipping through? Even Archie's appearance raised whispers. Staff remarked quietly, in the safest corners, that his size seemed inconsistent with the birth timeline. Was he larger than expected? Did he appear older? It was the kind of observation people kept to themselves, but couldn't shake. And Lhorren, tasked with feeding and soothing him, noticed it too. Yet every time she thought about it, she was reminded of Meghan's sharp warning. Don't question, don't assume, don't speculate. Just obey. And then there was the strangest instruction of all. Archie was never to be left unattended with certain staff members. Why? What did Meghan fear they would notice? Babies are vulnerable, yes, but they're also natural magnets for attention. To restrict even trusted aides from spending time with him suggested fear, not of harm, but of discovery. Direct question to you. If you had just given birth, would you lock down your baby's interactions this way? Would you forbid those who were hired to help from bonding naturally? Or would you only impose such rules if you were hiding something you couldn't afford anyone to see? The tension grew sharper as the night went on. Harry seemed nervous, uncertain. He smiled, but the smiles didn't reach his eyes. He held Archie, yes, but always with Meghan nearby, watching. Lhorren later admitted she felt as though Harry himself was following cues, as if he too was playing a role rather than living a moment. What does that tell us? Did Harry know the truth? Was he complicit in the illusion? Or was he simply caught in Meghan's orbit, afraid to break the fragile control she clung to so desperately? As the hours passed, Lhorren tried to settle into her role. She changed Archie. She soothed him, She prepared his feet. Yet everything was under Meghan's watchful gaze. The walls seemed to close in tighter with every passing hour. There was no joy in the room, no laughter, no relief. Instead, there was the suffocating sense that everyone was walking on eggshells, terrified of making a wrong move, of seeing too much, of saying the wrong word. And that's when the whispers began to take root. Behind closed doors, staff exchanged glances. Something wasn't right. This wasn't how new parenthood looked. This wasn't how royal households celebrated a baby. This was something else entirely, something secretive, something orchestrated, something fragile. And in that fragility, the seeds of suspicion sprouted. For Lhorren, the first night home with Archie was the beginning of her unease. She didn't yet have the full picture. She didn't yet understand the depth of what was being hidden. But she knew, instinctively, that nothing about this was normal. Not the instructions, not the restrictions, not the atmosphere, and certainly not Meghan's behavior. So she carried those questions silently, day after day, night after night, obeying the rules while her mind spun with doubt. Until the day came when the whispers about surrogacy, about a baby born through another woman, grew too loud to ignore. Because even within the palace, behind those locked gates, the speculation was growing. Staff wondered. Observers noted. And the idea that Meghan hadn't carried Archie herself no longer seemed like a cruel rumor. It began to feel like a possible truth. And it was that truth, hidden in plain sight, that haunted the nanny more than anyone else. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why would Meghan fight so hard against baby photos? For decades, royal babies have been introduced to the world with joy, transparency, and celebration. William and Kate stepped onto the steps of the Lindo wing after the births of George, Charlotte, and Louis. Kate smiling through exhaustion, William glowing with pride, the nation rejoicing. Before them, Princess Diana did the same with William and Harry, cradling them for the world to see. It's tradition. It's part of the royal bargain. The people get to share in the milestones of the monarchy. But Meghan and Harry shattered that tradition. No hospital steps. No candid baby photos. No press waiting outside with cheers and flashbulbs. Instead, Meghan waged a war against visibility itself. And the question is why? At first glance, her explanation seemed simple: privacy. She wanted to protect her son from the relentless British press, the same press she had accused of racism, cruelty, and intrusion. Many sympathized. Who wouldn't want to shield their child from the tabloids' cruelty? But as the months rolled on, her actions went beyond caution. They became obsession. Meghan and Harry fought every request for photos. They denied the public the joyful glimpses that had always come with royal children. They released only carefully staged, tightly cropped images, sometimes of Archie's feet, sometimes a shadowy silhouette. Instead of openness, there was secrecy. Instead of celebration, there was suspicion. Ask yourself, if you were a parent, would you deny the world even a single, simple photo of your newborn's face? Would you break a tradition that generations before you upheld with pride? Or would you only fight so hard if a photo risked exposing something you couldn't afford to let slip? Consider the timing. Just days after Archie's birth, reporters expected the usual fanfare. They were ready for the iconic hospital steps moment. But Harry and Meghan refused. Instead, they retreated behind palace walls, releasing a delayed, carefully staged photo op at Windsor Castle. Even that was odd. Archie was wrapped tightly, almost hidden. The world strained for a glimpse, but the image revealed little. And in that absence, speculation grew louder. Why hide the baby's face? Why restrict photographers? What was there to fear? The restrictions only grew stronger. Months later, on Archie's christening day, the public expected another glimpse. Yet again, Meghan denied them. No cameras, no crowd. Just a handful of official portraits, carefully selected, carefully edited. And once more, questions buzzed. What was Meghan so desperate to control? Why couldn't even joyous milestones be shared naturally? Inside the palace, the secrecy was even more stifling. Meghan issued strict orders. No staff were to take personal photos of Archie. No one was to share images, even privately. One aide confided later that it felt like working in a sealed chamber. The baby wasn't being raised in the warmth of a family surrounded by joy and openness. He was being guarded, hidden, as if his very existence were a state secret. And here's where it gets darker. Nanny Lhorren Khumalo, The woman entrusted with caring for Archie found herself under constant watch. Meghan dictated how Archie was to be presented, how he was to be carried, when he was to be shown, and to whom. There was no room for spontaneity, no room for natural affection in public. Every image was curated. Every detail was rehearsed. It wasn't parenting, it was performance. It wasn't just the public who noticed. Even within palace walls, staff began whispering. Aides who had served generations of royals quietly questioned why Archie was treated so differently. They compared notes, shared doubts, and more than once, they looked to Lhorren, the nanny, for answers. She didn't have them, not yet, but she felt the tension, lived it daily, and carried the weight of those questions in silence. And then came the breaking point. One evening, Lhorren, in the quiet of the nursery, asked Meghan a simple question. A question any nanny might ask. Maybe it was about Archie's routines. Maybe it was about his milestones. Maybe it was about why certain things didn't line up. But whatever the question was, Meghan's reaction wasn't normal. It wasn't the calm assurance of a new mother. It wasn't a gentle correction. It was sharp, defensive, almost panicked. Meghan's eyes flashed, her tone cut like a knife. She didn't just answer. She shut the conversation down completely. Why such overreaction to a simple question? Why did Meghan lash out at the very woman entrusted with caring for her child? Unless the question had touched a nerve. Unless it had struck dangerously close to the truth she was hiding. From that night forward, Lhorren knew her instincts were right. Meghan wasn't just guarding Archie from the cameras. She was guarding herself from exposure. And the harder Meghan fought against photos, the clearer it became. She feared the world would see something she could not control, something she could never explain away. And so the question deepens. If Meghan isn't hiding Archie from the press, what is she really hiding from the world? The answer lies in what Meghan whispered in private moments. Things overheard by staff. Contradictions in her own words. Slips of the tongue that revealed more than she intended. And it was those private moments, the secrets Meghan thought would never leave the palace, that gave the nanny the most haunting insights of all. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The secrets Meghan shared in private. Every carefully polished public appearance. Every scripted interview. Every smile for the cameras. All of it was designed to project control, composure, and confidence. But behind palace walls, when the cameras were gone and the audience disappeared, Meghan was different. She was restless. She was tense. And sometimes, in hushed conversations she assumed would never leave the room, she let slip fragments of truth, secrets that only a few staff, including the nanny, ever heard. And once those secrets were pieced together, they painted a very different picture of Archie's beginnings. Let's begin with contradictions. Meghan was clever, always aware of how she was perceived. Yet even the sharpest performer slips. One day, in conversation with staff, she described her morning sickness in vague, almost dismissive terms. She laughed it off, saying it wasn't so bad. But just days later, when questioned by another aide, she claimed it was unbearable, the hardest thing in the world. Which was it? Real mothers don't fumble when asked about their pregnancies. They remember the nausea, the cravings, the pain. For Meghan, those details shifted like sand. It was as if she had studied what she was supposed to say, but couldn't keep the story straight. Then there were the private admissions, small phrases, whispered when she thought no one was listening. Lhorren recalled Meghan once sighing, "I just can't imagine doing this again." On the surface, that sounded normal. What mother doesn't feel overwhelmed with a newborn? But the way she said it, the weight behind the words, felt different. It wasn't exhaustion, it was detachment. It was as if she was rehearsing a line rather than speaking from lived experience. Even stranger, Meghan sometimes referred to Archie not as "my baby," but "the baby." It may sound like a small detail, but language reveals truth. Most mothers instinctively say "my baby," with warmth and ownership. Meghan's words were colder, more formal, as if she were keeping a deliberate distance. Why? Was it subconscious? Was it a slip? Or was it her way of managing a truth she couldn't fully embrace? Direct question to you. If you overheard a new mother call her child "the baby" instead of "my baby," what would you think? Would it sound like detachment, or like a secret she didn't want to acknowledge out loud? Staff noticed other oddities. When asked about Archie's birth story, Meghan grew vague. She never shared details of labor, never joked about funny moments, never recalled the raw emotions that most mothers can't help but relive. Instead, she offered generalities, polished and rehearsed. It was beautiful. We're so grateful. He's a blessing. Words that sounded good for an interview, but not for the nursery. Not for late-night conversations with staff. And certainly not for the nanny who saw through the cracks. And then there were the rumors that Meghan herself fueled, perhaps unintentionally. In one tense exchange with Harry, overheard by staff, Meghan snapped, "You promised this would stay private." Private? What was this? The argument ended quickly when she noticed eyes on her, but the words lingered. Was she referring to Archie's origins? Was she reminding Harry of a pact to guard a secret bigger than themselves? But the most chilling moment came late one night, when Meghan confided to a close aide that she didn't feel connected. Many mothers experience postpartum struggles, but Meghan's words carried a different weight. She didn't describe sadness or exhaustion. She described distance. "Sometimes it feels like he isn't really mine," she whispered. The aide froze, unsure how to respond. What did Meghan mean? Was it a metaphor for postpartum detachment? Or was it the closest she had ever come to admitting the truth? Lhorren noticed these moments stacking up. Each comment alone might mean little, but together they formed a pattern of distance, a pattern of contradictions, a pattern of slips that suggested Meghan wasn't living the experience she was selling to the world. And the nanny, trained to notice details, couldn't ignore it. Even Archie's routines carried echoes of secrecy. Meghan would insist on feeding him herself, but sometimes she fumbled in ways that didn't make sense for a biological mother. Lhorren quietly wondered, if Meghan had carried Archie for 9 months, wouldn't these instincts come more naturally? Why did she seem to follow instructions from books and notes more than from experience? This brings us to the heart of the matter. Meghan's secrecy wasn't just about shielding Archie from cameras. It was about shielding herself from questions she couldn't answer. And in private moments, when her guard slipped, those questions became unavoidable. Ask yourself again, if Meghan truly was Archie's mother, why the contradictions? Why the vague birth stories? Why the detachment in language? Why the desperate control over every image, every routine, every detail? Wouldn't pride and joy have spilled over naturally, the way it did for Kate, for Diana, for countless mothers before her? Instead, what spilled over was tension, fear, and slips of the tongue that left those around her quietly wondering, what's the real story here? For Lhorren, these secrets were impossible to unhear. Each one deepened her unease. Each one tightened the knot in her chest. And though she stayed silent, bound by loyalty and contracts, her mind recorded everything. Until the day would come when she could no longer hold it back. And that day drew closer when something surfaced that no secrecy could fully control: official documents. Because the birth certificate, the very piece of paper that should have silenced all speculation, instead raised more questions than answers. And when the nanny saw the inconsistencies for herself, she knew the truth wasn't just whispered, it was written in black and white. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What the documents revealed. On paper, a birth certificate should be simple. It's a record of life, a document that anchors a child's existence to the world with dates, times, and names. It should silence speculation, not ignite it. But in the case of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, the official paperwork became yet another crack in the carefully crafted narrative. And for those who looked closely, including Nanny Lhorren Khumalo, the inconsistencies were impossible to ignore. Let's start with the basics. When Archie's birth certificate was first made public, something immediately jumped out. Meghan Markle's name had been altered. Initially, the certificate read, Rachel Meghan Markle, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. That seemed straightforward enough. But then, weeks later, the record was quietly amended. Her first names, Rachel Meghan, were removed. In their place, only her royal title remained. No explanation, no clarification, just a suspicious edit. Now ask yourself why? Birth certificates are legal documents. They aren't meant to be rewritten for cosmetic reasons. You don't just erase a mother's name unless there's something more at play. Some claimed it was a matter of style, a nod to tradition. Others insisted it was Meghan's decision, though she later denied it and blamed palace officials. But the truth is murkier. Because when it comes to a child whose very origins were already in question, changing the document only deepened the suspicion. Direct question to you. If you had nothing to hide, would you tamper with your child's birth certificate? Would you risk fueling conspiracy theories by removing your own name? Or would you only take such a drastic step if the document revealed too much? And this wasn't the only oddity. The certificate also listed the place of birth as Portland Hospital in London, a private facility known for catering to celebrities. Yet at the time of Archie's arrival, palace officials had suggested Meghan had gone into labor at Frogmore Cottage, before later confirming Portland. Why the conflicting reports? Why the delay in releasing accurate information? If this was a straightforward hospital birth, why the secrecy, the corrections, the fog of confusion? Lhorren Khumalo, bound by her role yet haunted by what she knew, couldn't ignore what the document implied. She had been present in Archie's earliest days. She had seen the inconsistencies in his size, his routines, Meghan's strange detachment. And now, staring at a birth certificate that had been altered after the fact, she understood what many feared. The paperwork itself didn't align with the reality she had witnessed. And it wasn't just Lhorren who noticed. Legal analysts, royal historians, even former palace staff began to raise questions. Why the edits? Why the errors? Why the fog of secrecy? And if everything was legitimate, why not release the details openly, as William and Kate had with their children? Transparency is the cure for suspicion. Instead, Meghan and Harry chose obfuscation. And every time they dodged, the speculation grew stronger. Consider this. Kate's children's birth certificates were released quickly, cleanly, with no revisions. The names, places, and times were clear. No drama, no confusion, no secrecy. The contrast with Meghan's approach couldn't have been starker. And that contrast mattered, because the monarchy is built on continuity and trust. Any crack in that foundation threatens the entire edifice. And then came the whispers inside palace walls. Some staff speculated that the document had been altered to obscure the truth, that Meghan hadn't given birth at all, and that the certificate had to be adjusted to maintain the illusion. Others suggested it was to erase traces of a surrogate arrangement, one that the palace could never admit publicly. Whatever the reason, the birth certificate became less a record of fact and more a symbol of suspicion. For Lhorren, the weight of silence grew heavier. She remembered the tension of Archie's first night home, Meghan's obsessive secrecy, the contradictions in her private confessions. And now, here was proof that even the official record had been tampered with. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it written in ink. Let me ask you directly. If a royal birth certificate, of all documents, cannot be trusted, what else in this story can? This is why Meghan's battle with the press, her obsession with privacy, her rigid control over images all start to make sense. Because if one crack appeared, if one inconsistency was noticed, the entire illusion might unravel. And Meghan knew it. That's why she fought. That's why she silenced. That's why she controlled. She wasn't protecting Archie. She was protecting herself. And yet, for all her efforts, the truth slipped through anyway. In whispers, in documents, in the quiet observations of the nanny who was there. And when Lhorren pressed, gently, carefully, to make sense of it all, she was met not with reassurance, but with warning. Stop asking questions. Those were the words that froze her. Words that echoed the unspoken threat of the palace machine. Words that told her she had stumbled too close to the truth. And for years, she obeyed. She stayed silent. She buried her doubts. She carried the burden alone. But silence has a way of eroding the soul. And eventually, at 48, Lhorren decided she could no longer obey. She could no longer protect a secret that wasn't hers to guard. She could no longer carry the weight of deception on her shoulders. And when she finally spoke, the world listened. But what exactly did it mean for her to break that silence? What did it cost her? And why, after so many years, did she finally decide that now was the time? Because the next chapter of this story isn't about documents. It's about a woman silenced, bound by loyalty and fear, who chose at last to risk everything to reveal what she knew. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The royal machine thrives on silence. Silence protects. Silence shields. Silence allows secrets to fester behind closed doors while the public consumes only what they are given. And for years, that was the role forced upon Nanny Lhorren Khumalo. She had seen too much, heard too much, and suspected even more. Yet every instinct to speak was crushed beneath the weight of contracts, threats, and the suffocating culture of royal discretion. From the moment Archie came home, Lhorren understood she was stepping into a different world. This wasn't just childcare, it was guardianship of a secret. Every instruction she followed, every moment she witnessed, every inconsistency she noticed became another brick in the wall of silence that surrounded her. She wanted to talk. She wanted to share her concerns. But the warning that still rang in her ears, "Stop asking questions," reminded her of the consequences. And those consequences were real. Royal staff are often bound by strict NDAs, legal agreements designed not just to protect privacy, but to prevent exposure of anything that could damage the monarchy. Breaking them isn't just frowned upon. It can destroy careers, reputations, even lives. For someone like Lhorren, who had dedicated her life to childcare, the threat of being blacklisted was terrifying. She knew one wrong move could end everything. So she stayed quiet. She smiled when needed, obeyed every order, and carried out her duties with professionalism. To the outside world, she was just another nanny, fading into the background as all good nannies are expected to do. But inside, the silence weighed heavier with every passing day. Because here's the truth about silence. It doesn't erase memory. It doesn't dissolve suspicion. It only buries it. And the deeper it's buried, the more powerful it becomes when it finally resurfaces. Ask yourself, could you carry a secret that undermined everything the world believed? Could you bite your tongue while lies were paraded as truth, while millions celebrated an illusion, while the child you cared for was treated like a carefully managed prop? Could you keep silent while the world moved on, oblivious to what you had witnessed in the shadows? Lhorren tried. For years, she tried. She told herself it wasn't her place. She told herself the truth was bigger than her. She told herself that speaking out would only cause harm. Harm to Archie, harm to Harry, harm to herself. She repeated those mantras like prayers, hoping they would quiet her conscience. But they didn't. Because conscience is louder than fear. And no matter how much you suppress it, it will not let you rest. There were nights she lay awake replaying every contradiction. Meghan's vague stories, the secrecy around the birth, the strange edits to the certificate, the strict orders that made no sense for a loving new mother. Each memory sharpened with time, until it burned like a brand on her heart. Silence didn't protect her. It haunted her. And then there was Archie himself. Lhorren adored him. She saw his innocence, his laughter, his cries. She rocked him to sleep, sang him lullabies, and carried him through milestones the public would never see. For him, she felt loyalty, not to Meghan, not to Harry, not to the palace, but to the child. And that loyalty gnawed at her. Because one day, Archie would grow up. One day he would ask questions. And what then? Would she still remain silent, complicit in a deception that defined his very identity? Direct question to you. If you were in her shoes, would you remain silent to protect yourself? Or would you risk everything to ensure the child you cared for grew up knowing the truth? For years, fear won. She played her part, swallowed her doubts, and carried on. But silence is not the same as forgetting. And though the palace may have thought they had buried her under loyalty and law, they underestimated the power of time. Because time changes everything. Children grow. Secrets fester. And those who once had nothing to lose suddenly realize they have nothing left to fear. By the time she reached 48, Lhorren was no longer the same woman who had tiptoed nervously around palace walls. She was older, wiser, freer. She had built a life beyond the palace, beyond Archie, beyond Meghan's suffocating control. And with that distance came clarity. The silence that once felt protective now felt like complicity. The secret that once seemed impossible to share now felt impossible to suppress. So she began to talk, quietly at first, carefully, testing the waters. And then, finally, she broke. She admitted what she had seen, what she had suspected, what she had carried for decades. And in that moment, the silence the palace had demanded shattered into pieces. But speaking came with a cost. Breaking silence is never without consequence. She risked her reputation. She risked legal backlash. She risked the wrath of Meghan and Harry, who had built their entire narrative on the illusion she now threatened to expose. But she chose truth anyway. Because sometimes truth is worth more than protection. Sometimes conscience is worth more than fear. And once she spoke, the world could never go back. Because her words were not just whispers, they were revelations. And they would lead to a confession so explosive that it would dismantle Meghan's carefully constructed story and force the world to reconsider everything it thought it knew about Archie's birth. And when that confession finally came, it didn't just shock, it shattered. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming.